All right, guys, he joins us every single Tuesday to talk all things Gamecocks football and Gamecocks athletics as a whole. Our good friend, JC Shurburtt of Inside the Gamecocks of the Big Spur, joins the show once again. JC, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. How are you?
Great. Good to be with you guys today.
So, JC, let's just jump right into it. And before we get on the field, we've got to start with another week, another viral moment. Shane Beamer's post-game press conference, the comments that he made. Just really quickly, your thoughts on the comments as a whole. And it raises a question for me, JC, that's bigger. Like, why do you think, do people have it out for Shane Beamer? Is it why do you think this is a weekly thing where it's like press conference clips? I mean, I understand more is being made of it because of the real problem is, on the field, the record, whatever. And I think if the record was reversed, what have you, we're not paying as much attention to these things. But thoughts on the comments on Saturday, the opening statement, if you will, about the win, celebrating the win, those who aren't, the miserable existence comments, and then just your thoughts. I mean, have you ever seen a season in which, and I know it might be recency bias, but a season in which it's just like week after week, it feels like sometimes day after day, there's like a new thing, a new viral comment that is spreading, if you will.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things at play here. If you remember, Chris, when Will Muschamp started not winning, they had the pitchforks. I think they had the pitchforks out for him from the beginning. I think a smaller portion of the fan base was not fired up. Will never really accept the fact Beamer's the coach, but a larger majority accept him over when they hired Muschamp. And it's probably because of Muschamp's record at Florida, to be honest with you. But if you remember Muschamp, everything he said was not right either. The injury reports, especially. And I always tell the story, and it's kind of funnier now that Xavier Legette's a superstar. Uh, Xavier Legette was the number 2 receiver on that 2020 team because they just didn't have anybody else. He was young, sort of raw, sophomore, and played against Florida, played against Vandy, and then all of a sudden he disappeared. There was no more Xavier Legette. Muschamp never said anything. By the time Bobo got the job, somebody finally asked about Xavier Legette. And Bobo goes, oh, yeah, he's a really good player and got a bright future. Unfortunately, he's been out for the season since the Vanderbilt game. And stuff like that with Will just drove the fan base crazy. And then with Shane, he's kind of on the other end of the thing, like super optimistic. He's going to thrive on positive energy. He's going to find a way to make it positive, that type of thing. I think that what people need to realize is coaches all determine their own brand and personality. And that's never, ever, 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 ever going to change. They can change their offensive schemes. They can change their defensive philosophy, change practice habits. They can evolve, but they are who they are. And the good ones remain who they are. They don't, because once you get them out of their comfort zone as far as who they are, you're going to lose. I mean, because then they're not being true to themselves. It's all just it's a ball of charlatans if that happens. So people just have to understand Shane Beamer's not going to change. In that part of it, he is not going to change. That's just who he is. Just like Will Muschamp is never going to give an injury report if he doesn't have to. And he's always going to say things like he's got a toe, even though he's got 10, hopefully. That kind of thing. The other part of it is the guy that visited for a reunion this past weekend. You get a real treat when Steve Spurrier is your head coach because he is who he is. And he just tells it like it is all the time. I mean, Spurrier didn't even try to really hide injuries. He's like, oh, he's got a little crack in his foot. Hopefully he'll be okay, but heck, I don't know. Maybe not. Shoot, we'll just have to see, and he would flat out just call people out. And we all remember the famous Ron Cooper press conference in 06 up in Kentucky where they almost blew a 2-touchdown lead. And he called poor Ron Cooper in to the press conference. And surprisingly enough, Coop lasted 2 more years on the staff, but we remember that. The special teams meltdown at Vandy in 14 that Spurrier just kept going on and on about. That's been posted, this time, and Spurrier was just brutally honest. He's like, well, we are who we are. We're just gonna go try to play our best. And Coach Spurrier didn't really get negative. it's just who he is, and he's beloved because he didn't change. He never changed. He was always Steve Spurrier. And so I think this fan base has been kind of spoiled by that. As far as, well, that's our guy. That's how that being the most successful coach in the history of the program until someone else is as successful or more, the standard is always going to be judged by that guy. Same thing happened at Clemson with Danny Ford when he left. I mean, they fired Ken Hatfield basically because he wasn't Danny Ford. And he called him out on it. And they replaced him with Tommy West, who was more like Danny Ford, and he didn't work out. And so then they got to Bowden, and then he didn't work out. And then Dabo he's Dabo, but he won, right? And so it takes that next guy, and you see it at every school that has a legend. I think Florida fans still feel the same way about Spurrier. Why is this coach saying this? Why is this coach saying that? So it's kind of a mental thing and a comfort level, because Spurrier was so successful here. You want that comfort that your program's in the right hands, just like it was with Steve. But this guy's not talking like Steve, so that's the issue there. I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think it's a thing to do with how they played Saturday or how they're going to play this Saturday. Is it something that's pissed off fans? Yes. The part of them, some of them. Do I understand where the fans are coming from? Yeah, I just explained why. I mean, they're just kind of used to something else. But fans and everybody else media, everybody, they have to realize that he's not going to change. He may, like I said, he may change the schemes, he may change the play callers, he may change responsibilities on his staff, he may recruit different players, change practice. There's all kinds of things that coaches evolve with, but I've never seen one that's good that evolves as far as like his personality and who he is and kind of the fabric of the program and how he wants to approach things from a positivity negativity standpoint. I'll also add one more thing quickly if I can. Mm-hmm. This generation of young people, they're a little different than maybe we were growing up, right? I'm not going to say they're highly sensitive, but they're highly in tune with things because they've grown up with phones in their hands. They've seen the world. They've seen, they've seen more than maybe some of us did growing up. And they don't really thrive on the negativity because they've been shrouded and dumped with negativity just because they've had this window to the world, and the world in general, the grown-up world, is a negative place. These folks almost grew up too fast. So they don't always respond, to this ultra critical stuff. And so if you're talking about reaching the players, it's probably better, even if you piss off some fans who, are just, saying whatever, because they're not used to hearing it, or they want a different message from you. I think if you have to choose between fan base and your players, then, you err on the side of the players because you don't want to lose them. The season's not over, all that good stuff. But Beamer's not going to change. I didn't have an emotion toward it either way. I'm not saying that I would have handled the press conference that way. I'm not saying I wouldn't have. I don't want to say don't care because, my listeners and readers and all care. So I need to care, but I'm just very, very neutral about that. I just think that coaches are who they are. He's the head coach. There's some things he may change, but I wouldn't put this high up on the list of things he needs to.
And to your point, JC, the issues are not the press conference. It's on the field and what we've seen this season, although it comes after a win. And admittedly, JC, like I'm speaking to myself, you wouldn't have known that South Carolina won the football game because I said this on social media. I said it on Saturday after the game. I said it yesterday. It was a win that for some reason felt like, maybe I won't say felt like a loss. It felt underwhelming. That's what it felt like. It felt underwhelming to the game. And give Jacksonville State credit, by the way, JC. That's a great football. Like, that's a really good football team. Rich Rodriguez is one hell of a coach. They've got a really good football team. Did the game go as you expected? Because I picked an 11-point margin of victory. I did not expect Jacksonville State to have the football driving with a chance to win the game. So maybe that's kind of what threw me off. But I mean, did you see that tight of a ball game coming? Did you think it'd be a little bit one-sided? Like, your thoughts on just the overall flow of the game and how it played out?
Well, the only game scarier was probably that Louisiana Tech game in 2017 when Muschamp was here, because that looked like it. I mean,
Wasn't it? I think it was 16-0 or
16-0. I mean, they shut them out until the Tyson Williams.
That was the Ortre Smith game. I think he had a big game that game.
Trey Smith had a big touchdown reception. Tyson Williams had a big run, and then Bentley threw it up to Brian Edwards. Somehow came out of it a prayer, and they ended up winning.
That was Parker White's first made field goal attempt, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, and it was one of a couple game winners, I think. Yeah, but look, that was a scary game. I mean, App State in 2019 was a loss. Then it kind of unfolded that way. Gamecocks actually, I thought that game they outgained App 372 to 20. Defense held them 200 yards. I don't know. I don't know how they lost that. Helinski just kind of couldn't get it done. That was
another nightmare Eli Drinkwitz matchup.
Yes, yeah. That we'll call it the Book of Eli. There got us, but and then the Wofford debacles back in Spurrier, like they won by 7 that year. Wofford's on the freaking 2-yard line, and I'm talking about scary as in a lesser opponent. Of course, also in 2017, a bad Tennessee team that we didn't know was that bad at the time had the ball first to goal at the 2, down 6, could not score. And Carolina, that's the last time they won at Neyland Stadium. But, it felt like that. Now, I don't think Carolina, they came out with a lot of good energy. I think as the game went on, it just seemed like, with the exception of a few guys, there wasn't that energy that they were playing with. Meanwhile, Jacksonville State gained confidence as the game went on. I thought Jacksonville State had a great game plan on both sides of the ball. I think Carolina did not execute. I think fundamentals left a lot of the players on Saturday. I was talking to somebody. I was very happy for Stone Blanton getting that big play, that pick 6, and I was happy for O'Donnell Fortune getting the next interception. But those guys didn't play very well. I mean, bottom line is the body of work was not that good. I think the defense continues to have the same issues over and over and over again. Luckily, and I haven't researched who it was. Whoever had the pressure on the pick 6 is probably the unsung hero, because the kid, he was getting sacked, and the receiver was, if he did, that would have been a touchdown, And so thank God somebody got pressure and he just carelessly threw it, and that's ball game. But it just, they didn't have the type of energy and execution that you would expect. The run game, you expect South Carolina, I guess, a smallish D line, to be able to line up and run it, even with the issues on the O line. The announcers for the game kept saying how great the pass protection was. I thought when they did hold up, Spencer made some plays down the field, but I don't think they held up the whole time. Not against a team like that. But now, to Jacksonville State's credit, their schemes are way different. It is a special preparation game. I won't say it's hard as playing Wofford with the triple option and all that, but their defense and offense both, it's not something you're going to see every week. And so that's not an excuse for how they played, but it's probably a reason that Jacksonville State did give them so much trouble. And then Jacksonville State's got great athletes, I think, for that level. They're you compare them to like a Furman. Jacksonville State has a higher level athlete than maybe your normal FCS team. And of course, they just transitioned up from FCS. And, in these types, not under Rich Rod, but in these types of situations under other coaches, they beat Florida State and Tallahassee. They beat Ole Miss and Oxford back in the Houston Nutt era. So they took Auburn to overtime, and that was a really good Auburn team. So they've got some experience, slaying the Giants, so to speak. So the Gamecocks, very fortunate to escape with a win, considering how they played. But, that also means there's a lot of improvement that has to be made for them to have a shot to do what they need to do to get to a bowl.
A win is a win is a win, JC. That's the bottom line. You snap that 4-game losing streak. As you mentioned, you kick off the month of November in this 4-game home stretch with a W, which obviously you had to have. I'll ask you this, though. Spencer Rattler was brilliant, I thought, just under 400 yards. And I say that too, JC. I will point out, maybe it's an unfair comparison because he was so good against Florida, Mississippi State, Furman, those home games, what have you. Maybe Rattler wasn't quite as locked in as those games. You saw a couple underthrown balls, but still, he was great. Xavier Legette, fantastic. The offensive line struggled. Defense did generate 4 turnovers, but had their struggles throughout the day. I say all that to ask this, JC. Do you feel like we learned anything new about this football team? Did you leave the Jacksonville State game with any new information, or was it just, okay, the things we thought about this team, it is what it is, and you carry that forward?
Man, nothing much. I mean, there wasn't really anybody that was new that stood out. I think we've known Xavier Legette's a pretty good player, and it kind of reinforced some things for me. And here's another thing people need to kind of consider. Dowell Loggins is coaching his butt off right now, man. I mean, there's not a lot, and I'll take you back to Steve Spurrier. When his offensive line was bad during his early years, they didn't go very far. I mean, I remember a lot of 14-7 games or 17-10 games. I remember getting shut out by Georgia at home, throwing a grand total of 7 on the board at Auburn. And this injury situation on the offensive line, Chris, this is the worst situation up front injury-wise this program's had since 1999. And that year, the Gamecocks did not win a game. So I don't know. I could sit here and critique every play call and all that, but I think he's doing a good job of scheming the playmakers he has open. And that's an important thing for an offensive coordinator. You look, what does South Carolina have? Well, they've got Xavier. They got a couple of receivers that could do some things here and there. They got Mario, and they've got 2 really good pass-catching tight ends. Of course, Trey was hurt on Saturday and missed. But Josh Simon steps right in, 7 catches for 64 yards, made his share of plays. Bad offensive coordinators do not get the ball in the hands of their playmakers enough. I think we all went through that the last 2 years where we're sitting there wondering why in the heck against Georgia Juice Wells isn't targeted, or why in the heck Jaheim Bell wasn't playing and targeted and all that good stuff. Those days are over. I mean, he's making the most of what he can with what he's got. I think that's fair about Spencer. He probably wasn't quite as dialed in as, say, Mississippi State or the Furman game or even Florida, where he played magnificently. But he did enough to win the game. And his body language during the football game, Chris, was superior. It's superb. Superior's the comparison. Superb. It was outstanding. He showed a lot of leadership, even encouraging the defense and things like that. He and Debo Williams both, at times, according to some folks that were right behind the bench, seemed to be, and I'm not criticizing anybody else, but it seemed to be those are the guys that were lifting everybody up. And so that's good. That's good leadership. That's what quarterbacks do. Again, 399 yards. He's closing out. Yeah, I don't know if he'll break Dylan Thompson's record or not, but it's within reach, the single season passing yardage mark. So it's within reach. So that was a good performance by him. And another thing I'm impressed with him this year as opposed to maybe last, and Dowell deserves credit for this, Dowell Loggins, is yes, the offense is simplified. And yes, he's not thinking as much as he was asked to last year, but it's still got a lot of pro elements, and he's still having to make reads and go through his progressions like pro quarterbacks do. And he's doing it at a higher level than I saw at any point last season. So that's going to help him next year when he's in the league. It's going to help him get drafted. He'll be the first quarterback drafted since Todd Ellis in 1990. That's a long time. So hats off to Spencer and Dowell Loggins for, not only putting him in a system that allows him to thrive, but, getting him better at a key part of that system and the execution that big-time quarterbacks have to do.
JC, here comes the Vanderbilt Commodores, and South Carolina is looking for their 15th straight win over Vandy. You think about 15 years, JC. We've seen some really, really good Gamecocks football. We've seen some really, really bad Gamecocks football. I'll start with the fun question. Where was J.C. Shurburtt the last time Vanderbilt beat South Carolina?
I was in Nashville. It was a Thursday night game. I wasn't living in Nashville at the time. I had just moved back to Columbia the previous year to start the BigSpur.com. I was in Nashville from 04 to 07. I worked at Rivals.com in the home office and was the national recruiting editor after about 6 months there. And but then I got approached about starting an ESPN site and Big Spur. And we wanted to go home. My wife and I at the time wanted to go home, so we went home. But we drove up for the game, and then it was Labor Day weekend, and so we were going to go. We went to Tybee. We drove all the way back from Nashville to Tybee Island, Georgia, afterwards, and sat on the beach and sulked for the rest of the weekend. But that was a frustrating football game because, Carolina had started. That was the Tommy Beecher's going to start year, and they played NC State. Believe it or not, Russell Wilson was quarterback at NC State, and Carolina's defense just State went nowhere, but State was bad that season. Tom O'Brien's first or second year. So it's 13-0, and they finally benched Beecher, and Beecher never played again. They put Chris Smelly, who had started something back in, and Smelly leads them to like 3 late garbage touchdowns. So they beat State 34-0. So they go to Vandy, who had ruined their season the year before. And that was Bobby Johnson's best team. That was his bowl team. And things just didn't go right. Carolina had no answers for Vandy on defense. Again, Smelly was under pressure all night long, and then they figured out the defense and scored 24-17. And so that was it. And that's there's been 2 stadiums I've been at as an opposing fan or whatever where somebody's really an opposing fan's acted very inappropriately after the game and almost got their teeth knocked down their throat. That was one of them. That and Kentucky in 06. The Ron Cooper game, that I mentioned earlier. Those were it's kind of funny. Kentucky and Vandy are the 2 places that that I'm almost scrapped at after the game, for whatever reason.
Vandy especially, you wouldn't expect to hear that. That seems like a pretty tame crowd, I would imagine. But
I've been to so many Vanderbilt Carolina games because I went back to Nashville in 2011, so I was there for 4 or 5 years after that. But it was I've been to a lot of Vandy games and never had a problem. But that particular night, I guess, wrong place, wrong time. Thank goodness my ex-wife was with me because she kind of was like, you need to calm down. Had to drive to Tybee Island the next day. Said no alcohol was involved, nothing. Not at least not on my end. But that was an exercise in restraint after that one.
So, JC, you look at this year's matchup, this Vanderbilt team, and again, like I mentioned, death taxes and Gamecocks football beating Vandy, no matter how good or bad each side is. But this Vanderbilt team specifically, I think, JC, they've been one of the more, believe it or not, disappointing teams in the SEC. When you look at how they finished last year, beat Florida, beat Kentucky, they were a 5-win team. A lot of folks, their best bet was the Vanderbilt over 3.5 total wins. A loss to UNLV early in the season derails that. They haven't won a game since, haven't won an SEC play. They've had issues at the quarterback position. They've played both Swan and Seals this season, have not really been able to settle on one guy. They don't run the football that well, 93 rushing yards per game. They throw it for about 235 yards per game. They do have 2 dynamic playmakers at receiver in Will Sheppard, Jaden McGowan. Will Sheppard, JC, 44 catches for 634 yards and 8 touchdowns on the season. But outside of that, again, JC, Vandy does not do a ton well. I'd say defensively they're okay. There should be opportunities for South Carolina. So this is a game you open up as a 2-touchdown favorite. Like, you should win the football game on paper. But you know as well as I do, JC, streaks are meant to be broken, and at some point, some year, Vandy's going to beat South Carolina. It's going to happen beyond any sense of comprehension. It's going to be an upset when it does, right? We almost saw it in 2021. Last year's game was really sloppy in Nashville. Gamecocks won the turnover battle 4-1 in an 11-point victory. What are you most looking forward to in this game? Obviously, a win is number one, but South Carolina needs to go out and play a good football game to get this victory because Vanderbilt, obviously, they know about the street. Clark Lee, he's a good coach. They're going to come in ready to play. They haven't had any success. Much like last year, nobody expected them to beat Florida or Kentucky. You don't want to be that team that comes into this one sleepwalking and all of a sudden you look up in the fourth quarter and Vanderbilt's got a lead on you. You're in a tight ball game. So what you're most looking forward to in this game, in a game that South Carolina, we all feel should come out victorious?
Yeah, man, he's not coming here scared. I'll tell you that. I mean, they're going to come in here thinking. I mean, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, Chris, because they played in week 0 against Hawaii and they won it, but it was a struggle against Hawaii at home. This is probably where they're looking at it because Tennessee's next, and Tennessee broke one off in their hind parts last year in Nashville. They got to go to Knoxville this year. As a chance to maybe get that not go winless in the league. You talked about Shepard and McGowan. McGowan is a guy, if you do not cover him down, I'll say this, if you do not cover him downfield, he can get you. He's from Lawrence, South Carolina. He's small, but he's got world-class speed. You've got to get him on the ground. And because he's so small, sometimes he's hard to tackle. So the tackling left a lot to be desired against Jacksonville State. You got to get him on the ground. They'll also pitch him the ball to try to manufacture a running game because you're right, Chris. They struggle to run the football. If you're them, you're probably a little mad at Ray Davis, right? Because Ray's so good and Ray's from California. And so you're like, if he leaves you and goes back home, let's say he went to Stanford or Cal or Oregon State or even UCLA or so, you understand. But, man, he went up the road to Kentucky. That's got to really chap you if you're Vandy. So they're missing him big time. As far as their defense goes, Auburn kind of went up and down the field on them. Auburn's not a great offensive football team. Georgia pretty much that was what I call a pretty score for Vandy, 37-20. But they took their foot off the gas, pretty much. Everything
point, else. JC, not to cut you off, but Vanderbilt allowing 255.5 yards per game through the air, 180 yards per game on the ground. So it should be kind of whatever Dabble Loggins wants to dial up. You would think both sides of the offense should be able to get going, if you will. Find that
as much as South Carolina struggled on defense, Vandy's worse. UNLV came back from 17 down to beat them out in Vegas. I don't know why you scheduled that, but anyway, but it's also one of those things. Clark Lee is a gifted defensive coordinator, and just like most coaches do when things aren't working, you could surprise attack. Maybe it's a look they're not looking for. If you can't stop the deep ball like you haven't been able to do most of the year, and Shepard gets behind you or McGowan gets behind you, and you're down 17-0 early, that other sideline is going to be feeling chipper, and then you're going to have to go adjust. Now, I think Dowell Loggins can make adjustments a lot quicker, maybe the other side of the ball has at times, but that's a concern if there's some kind of element of surprise. And Seal, you mentioned Seals, and so they're both very capable passers. They're not. Both those kids are good quarterbacks. They're just they don't have a lot of surrounding talent. But if not, Vandy just comes out there and plays their normal old defense and all that, it should be a big day for the Gamecocks. I think, with the exception of the two receivers that can beat you deep. Of course, we found out Jacksonville State has receivers that can beat you deep, but it's probably a better matchup. There's less things to be concerned about with all the motion and jet sweeping and perimeter play and option and stuff that Jack State ran. Vandy's more of a straightforward type attack. And, I think that the Gamecocks offense should have another really good day at home.
And the good news, JC, the game is at Williams-Brice Stadium, where Spencer Rattler and the Gamecocks offense has been electric. JC Shurburtt of Inside the Gamecocks, the Big Spur. JC, last thing before I get you out of here. There's been a lot of chatter about Juice Wells and his future and his status for this season, but his future, I think, more importantly, that potentially maybe NIL could play a major role in getting him back to South Carolina. What can you tell us about that, if anything? Obviously, you run a collective, you're in the NIL space. Like, What would you set maybe the odds at, the percentage at that he returns next year? Is that is there a realistic path for that, or is that just kind of wishful thinking by the Gamecocks fan base at this point?
I'll answer your question like this. I don't want to put odds on it because I think it's impossible to handicap at this point, because with anything like this, there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of people that maybe get involved suddenly that weren't involved before, and all that good stuff. So you just never know. But I will say there's a realistic path towards him returning next year. I am not going to rule that out at all. And so some fans have, but I haven't gotten on the megaphone and yelled at everybody. Hey, no, that's not true. I mean, people can speculate all they want, because I don't want people to be like very disappointed if he doesn't go. I honestly think it could go either way, but there is a path for him to come back. If you look at his commercial NIL deals he has through Park Avenue, which is part of Carolina Rise, he is the I think the leader in the conference as far as number of endorsement deals. He's doing fine, and he loves playing at South Carolina. And you have to think with this draft class is full of great receivers. You have to think that only playing in one game, or if it ends up being 3 or 4, that's probably going to bump him back. And the kid could be a first rounder. This is just an unfortunate injury that happened. So, if you follow that line of thinking, and he follows that line, I think he could be back. If not, wish him well, because I think no matter where he's drafted, the kid's going to be a pro. I think he's going to be an outstanding NFL receiver. He just may have to go in the 6th, 7th round and prove it a little more and have a little less signing bonus money when he gets there.
JC, it's fun to think about the potential of Juice Wells and Nick Harbor on the outside, and potentially Lenora Sellers delivering them the football. We shall see what the future holds. JC, appreciate you taking the time as always, my friend. Can't wait to do it again next week.
Thanks, Chris.